Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I am Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is a professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote session workshop and speech at a time. And on this episode, well, this is the first of a four-part series, if you will, with guests speaking about speaking internationally. We went all over the globe for this one, with a lot of amazing speakers with their global points of view. Now, to all my speaking friends, are you an international speaker because you've checked that box? Or are you someone who looks at those markets as a true line of business? For a lot of people, it's been there, done that. For others like me, we go back again and again in those markets by choice, by targeting, by lifestyle and more. But it's not just by chance, but instead by choice. In part one, then, we'll ask some global experts, what does it take to be a successful international speaker as opposed to someone who only speaks occasionally internationally? Let's dive in then with the perspectives of speakers all over the world who have seen what works and what does not. Hopefully some of their insights will help you take a new look on what it takes to become a successful international speaker. Let me remind you too that if you're not following their voices on the audio version, then make sure to check out NSA's YouTube channel to watch the video version of the show there. The experts we're showcasing today in order of appearance include US-based Ruby Newell Legner, US-based Sylvie di Giusto, New Zealand's Elias Kanaris, US-based Stan Phelps, the UK's Lavelda Vincenzi, Singapore's David Lim, South Africa's Joni Petty, Germany's Rainer Pettick, Sweden's Anthony Lacanai, Canada's Fotinia Economopoulos, and closing us out is Mexico's Jesus Tobias. And before we jump in, make sure to go to Speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Let's learn from some special people, and then I'll see you on the other side with some key takeaways. Ruby, you obviously know the international marketplace well. What do you think it takes today to be successful as a speaker in the international marketplace? How do we distinguish ourselves as international keynote speakers?
Well, Shark, that's a great question. One of the biggest thing is you just have to do your homework. You have to be very aware of all of the things that are happening in that country. For instance, one of the biggest areas that I started in was in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And little did I know that not only was I going to research that area, but my first client over there, the Jumeirah Group, they have 42 nationalities that work at the water park where I did training, and the hotel has 92 nationalities. So not only was I doing the research of the country that I was going to, but I also had to do research on all of the countries that are represented in the facility that I'm doing training for. So it's a big area that I had to get used to. And I knew that they all spoke English, and so I prepared in that respect, but I didn't know that they didn't read English very well. So there was that. So doing a lot of homework and finding out what their issues are and finding out the cultures. The cultures are so different, and understanding the colloquialisms of what the nuances of the cultures are too. Knowing what you can do and what you can't do. For instance, one of the mistakes I made at the very beginning, I teach a technique called soften technique for customer service: smile, open posture, lean forward, tone of voice, eye contact, and nod. Well, in some of the Middle Eastern countries, eye contact is not a good thing. Eye contact is not a very positive thing. So a woman and man don't have eye contact. And here I was going into their country, teaching it. Not a good thing. Okay, should have known that before I went there. And so there's just so much to know when you go to another country and do your homework and review. We don't like to review our material with our customers. We don't like when they ask us to review the PowerPoint. In that case, I should have done that with my customer and make sure that I was teaching the appropriate things. So there's a lot of things that you need to do, and how to pronounce things. Ironically, I had done so many of the conversations over email that I didn't know how to say Jumeirah. And so I pronounced it incorrectly the first time I said it out loud during the session. So, there's a lot of mistakes that we can make if we don't do our homework and embarrass ourselves. So make sure that you've covered all the bases and make sure that that first impression is really positive. So that leads to more work over there if you've done a good job of it. So international speaking is a great adventure, and it can lead to much more business. But if you have prepared, understanding the cultures and the different the traditions, the holidays. There's a book that I read right from the very beginning. It's called "Don't They Know It's Friday?" Because it's changed recently. But when I first went over to Dubai, their work week was Sunday through Thursday, and wow, who would have known if I hadn't, looked it up and found out that they don't work on Fridays. That's what the book is all about. Don't they know it's Friday? And so the different things that you need to know to be aware of those things is just really important.
Sylvie, in your opinion, obviously there are a lot of things, but what does it take to be successful, to be an international speaker, as opposed to someone who just speaks occasionally internationally?
I think it takes commitment. Commitment in several areas. First of all, I think you need to commit what kind of international speaker you want to be other than an occasional speaker. Some of us have to commit that we are international lifestyle speakers. We don't care about the sea. We just want to travel around and see the world and enjoy that lifestyle. Or you commit to being a dual perspective speaker. Some of us grew up in another country and now live in a different country and can bring up that dual perspective. Some of us are local legends and can transfer this thought leadership on a global platform. I think the first thing that you need to commit to is what kind of international speaker are you actually? And how successful will you be in that area? Because what certainly doesn't work is you aren't successful locally and now you think that you are going to be successful globally. The second is commitment to adaptability. I mean, if you are not adaptable in the US market, you better buckle up on how adaptable you must be when you want to speak internationally. And that goes from your content, your level of customization to the cultural sensitivity. You must commit to grit and resilience because that is not easy. Everybody thinks it's so beautiful to travel around the world and enjoy international travel. You better back it up. If you complain about delays within the US when it comes to travel or any logistical hiccups, then just multiply that when you travel internationally. Keeping up with international relationships is so much more difficult than with our US relationships. And also very important, I think the commitment to accept that there are legal and financial implications if you want to do that really seriously. Because some of us speakers who do that just from time to time think, oh yeah, I'm just going to go there one time and I'm going to enter a country and I'm going to leave it and just do that one gig. If you want to do that seriously, you have to accept that there are visa requirements, that there are legal requirements that you have to follow, that there are tax
issues,
implications, that you have to think through things like payments, exchange rates, currency exchange rates, insurance, liability, so many things that you have to think through. So I think my number one word to make this a really serious part of your business would be commitment, really committing to it.
Well, meeting planners always know that my soft spot is when they say near a beach in Brazil. So when they had, you had me at hello. That's usually where it is. Elias, in your opinion, what does it take to be successful as an international speaker? You're in New Zealand. Not all of your speaking gigs are in New Zealand. You've spoken in a lot of countries. How do you go about positioning yourself successfully in this global marketplace?
And that's a great question to start off with. When I was first starting in New Zealand, I had our representative of the Global Speakers Federation approach me and saying, Elias, do you want an international business? I said, look, I live in New Zealand. Everything is international. So she said, to be successful in international, what you need to do is you need to go and travel around the world and go to attend as many of the conferences as you can and offer to serve. Let me just pause there a second. Offer to serve. Don't go there looking for business. Go there to add value to other people. And you can use that as the principle of, I'm going to go out there with the principle of serving you, adding value, and getting to know you. But people get to know, like, and trust you. They're going to give you business. And for me, that's a fundamental requirement for you to be successful internationally. Go out there without an expectation of receiving, but offer to give, offer to connect, offer to develop the relationships that will get you the recommendations and referrals going forward.
It's Stan, fish to fish, goldfish to shark. Can you give us a tip? I've been waiting on using that one at some point. Can you give us a tip on what you think it takes to be a successful speaker in the international market as opposed to just the market here in the States?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a tip. I think, one, you have to lean into being open to travel globally to speak. And I'm a big believer, once you know that that's what you want to do, you'll figure out how to do it. And I had been fortunate enough on 3 different occasions to live abroad. I absolutely love traveling. And so, especially for me in the beginning, Kenneth, it was any and every opportunity I had when I was traveling to lean in and reach out to my connections. And we all know how it is. You get into a certain market, or in this case, a couple countries that I spoke at. You get to meet people, they get to experience you, and all of a sudden you're top of mind when the next opportunity comes. So I would recommend to anyone who thought they wanted to do global speaking to try to lean in as much as possible and just start. It starts with one country, and hopefully you can continue to build that resume.
Lavelda, as somebody that especially does a lot of moderating and MC work, I think this is especially interesting with you being in England. You have enough of a population there to support a lot of events, but obviously you've got to look outside of there. In your opinion, what does it take to be successful as an international speaker, as opposed to someone who just wants to speak on occasion internationally?
I think if you really want to be an international speaker, one of the main things I think you absolutely have to understand is different cultural contexts. It's not quite as simple as lifting and shifting. So I do a lot of stuff in and around Europe, and you think Europe is reasonably similar, but depending on where I am in Europe, actually the climate's very different, the audience is very different, and the expectations of what I deliver are very different. And so if international is where you want to be and you want to be doing it on a regular basis, then you will have to go back and review your delivery styles and your content for different geographies, right? A joke that landed really well at home just may not land in another country, even if it's English speaking.
Those Germans don't laugh enough.
Us Brits have a different type of humor, you know? It's not quite the same thing.
David, in your opinion, what does it take to be successful as an international speaker?
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Well, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've probably spoken in I keep in count now, about 83 different cities and 34 different countries. And that's paid engagements. And I could have had a higher amount, except that I didn't want to do a lot of the so-called do this gig for exposure. We all know what those are. But yes, I've been in the business for quite a long time, and because I'm from Singapore, it's a very small island city-state. A lot of the engagements are regional, thereby they are international, and they're further afield. So it really depends on the kind of client and the kind of requirement.
David, how do you think about your speaking fee? Because obviously it's going to vary to some degree with travel costs is one thing, but some countries that I'm sure that you've spoken to didn't have the same applicable budgets that other countries may have had, unless it was a country that operated in all of those different markets.
Yes, Kenneth. I was 99% of the time, if your event is being held, someone's hiring you, and the event is being held, say, for example, in Cambodia and Vietnam, basically in a country where the standard and the cost of living is not very high, almost suddenly the meeting just happens to be held in that country. It's rarely ever that a small, medium-sized enterprise or even a large enterprise that's homegrown in those kind of what we call poorer countries, for example, could afford some of the fees that many speakers in National Speakers Association charge. So that's the reason why a lot of people want to come to where I live, Singapore. Right? And I say the good thing with Singapore is that clients here have a propensity to pay. And here's the bad news. Clients here have a propensity to pay. What do I mean by that? It means that everybody wants to come here and get a slice of the market. So it's very competitive, and you can't bring your B game. You're going to bring your A game. People here have been around the block a few times, right? And there are many, many locally based speakers and content experts who are at a global level already. So the days in the 80s and 90s where somebody who was really a second tier content expert could come from the United States, and because that person's coming from the United States, they'd be like welcomed with open arms, and they'd make a big deal about it. No more, not for the last 10, 20 years, maybe, I think. But almost certainly, look at countries where there's propensity to pay, where clients who are based there, often working for multinationals, have those kind of budgets. The budgets won't be so deep though. So a equivalent senior VP in, say, Hong Kong or Singapore won't have the same kind of budget as his equivalent partner in America, for obvious reasons, right? Markets are often smaller in total sales, for example, so budgets tend to be commensurate smaller. That being said, I would say that, without mentioning dollars, I know some people on these shows talk about bananas very high. Let's say you charge 5,000 bananas. I would say that in terms of thousands of bananas, fees for those markets which have a propensity to pay are fairly decent. And I think unless you're in the 15 to 30,000 bananas kind of like realm, I think there's a lot of work to be had outside of that range, basically, or below that range. There is a lot. So, and I think most people will fall in those kind of categories. So the good news is that there's a market out there for your content if it's relevant to the audience, which is the most important thing. DE&I is, for example, very big, and it all started in America here. It's only just catching up in Singapore. If you asked me 10 years ago, would this particular speaker be relevant and would be able to get a paid engagement here? I said probably not. Now I'm changing my mind because that's becoming a sunrise topic in Asia Pacific. I could go on, right? I mean, there are some people who come from a former military background. Again, those kind of topics here, they have to be significantly modified, I think, if they wanted to address a largely Asia Pacific type of audience.
Joni, in your opinion, as being someone in South Africa, especially as you look at yourself globally and not just inside the confines of South Africa, what does it take, in your opinion, to be successful when positioning yourself as an international speaker?
I think from the get-go, Shark, is you need to decide where do you want to target. If you just give yourself the big umbrella statement, international speaker, you're all things to all people. You really need to decide. And coming from South Africa, I decided that I love working in the Middle East. So I've targeted the Middle East. My mother was born in Australia. I have targeted Australia. I love Singapore. I've targeted Singapore. So it's really, where do you want to target? I mean, it's easy also for me to go and speak in Europe as well. But I'm also a speaker who aligns to my personal values, which is make a difference, exercise optimism, and my third personal value is relationships matter. So to become an international speaker, I want to make a difference wherever I go. And if I can sink my teeth into the cultural sensitivities of the area. So the Middle East is fascinating for me, and a lot of change, obviously a lot of turbulence as well. But really understanding what business sectors are going through in the Middle East and the opportunities that's where I find that I make a true difference and I live up to my value. So targeting is very important, and you can target the countries or you can target, obviously, your industry sectors. But I have, targeted certain geographies in the world.
Reiner, you live in Germany. Give us your point of view on what it takes to be a successful speaker in the international market.
So I usually started to speak not internationally, but mainly focused on Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So the German-speaking countries in Europe in the beginning. And my development towards speaking internationally was primarily driven by my clients, because the clients got bigger and bigger. I got bigger contracts, and there are a lot of world market leaders in Germany, in Switzerland, and in Austria, and they have international entities. They have a structure that more or less is at least Europe-wide or worldwide. And so, speaking for them in German first, and being recommended by them also to their other European or foreign countries wasn't okay. And this is also today where I've spoken on 5 continents in 29 countries so far. It's mainly driven by headquarters that are in Germany, in Switzerland, or in Austria. So this was my more or less organic and natural way to go international.
Anthony, in your opinion, living in Sweden and having that viewpoint, what does it take to be successful as an international speaker?
There's a lot of things we can look at. For instance, curiosity. Having a curious mindset about what's going on in the world, and then bringing that global mindset and that global insight to the different regions you're in. I was recently in Singapore speaking, and I referenced at least 5 countries, from the US to the UK to Japan to all sorts of countries, including my own, and give examples of what it means. In my case, I was speaking at an HR conference, and just bringing that global insights to that region makes them understand the value also of bringing a global speaker.
Fotini, what is a tip that you might have on how to speak internationally?
I would say, as somebody who's Canadian and spends a lot of feet on the ground in America and other countries, it's making sure that you articulate the fact that you are from some other place as a benefit and not a disadvantage, because there's a lot of attitude in some of those markets where they go, why would we want to bring in an outsider? And I find sometimes it's my advantage when I'm in Canada to tell them I'm Canadian, I get your market. But sometimes it's going, hey, I'm Canadian, but I have been in all these other markets, and here's why this perspective is going to be so helpful to you. So even in my home country, the fact that I have spent time in other markets is valuable. And the same is true when you're going to these other markets. What is it that you bring? How does your unique perspective benefit these folks? And by being able to articulate that, it's going to make you far more attractive versus them perhaps even going with someone local. They're going to want to fork out the extra cash to bring in an international speaker.
Jesus, what does it take, in your opinion, to be successful as an international speaker, as opposed to someone who occasionally speaks internationally?
Yeah, well, Kenneth, thank you for inviting me to your. Well, I've had to speak from my own experience. I didn't mean to be a speaker from the very beginning of my career. I started giving speeches and lectures because I invented a product when I was a student of engineering here in Mexico. So when I invented that product and won several prizes here in Mexico and in the US, then I started to manufacture this product in Mexico and China. And obviously, other universities started asking me to go in their universities to give a speech or a lecture about how to invent a product, how to how to create a company and all that stuff. So that's why I started giving speeches. I didn't intend to be a speaker, never. So after doing that for more than 10 years, I realized that what the world really needs is not more inventors, but more good and happy people. That's why I switched my lecture to happiness and ethics, just to have a better and happier world. And everybody is looking for that. So is what I'm talking about always, about happiness and how to have a happier world. And obviously, most of the people are interested in that. So obviously, when you go to a new country, first, I think if you're talking about something else different than happiness, obviously, you have to be strong in your own country before going abroad. Because when you are going abroad, everybody is going to look who you are. Is going to trying to find on the internet who is this person who is trying to give a speech over or whatever. So what I can give you as advice is try to boost their brains and melt their hearts. So it's going to be easier to get to wherever you want to go. Is what I do.
Now, let's do a quick recap based on their expert international advice. Number one, cultural adaptability is a must. Being successful internationally isn't about lifting and shifting your local speech. Your local research and understanding of diverse is important wherever you speak. Whether it's in Kenya or Kentucky, knowing local customs, humor, and even workweek structures helps avoid embarrassing missteps and builds trust faster. Number two, offer value first. People are people all over the world. And when you build those relationships and help others achieve without an immediate sales agenda, it can lead to a lot of referrals and repeat bookings. The sales will come, but several emphasized an important reminder to offer to serve, not sell. Number three, define your international strategy. Don't just chase the international speaker label. Target specific regions or industries that align with your values, expertise, and interest. A clear focus helps position you as a sought-after expert and a clear solution wherever you are. Friends, make sure to join us at Speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. I'm Kenneth Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another fantastic episode of the show. Gracias, merci, arigato, obrigado, spasibo, and thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.